Welcome to episode 51, a pure web server, part 1. So this is the beginning of what's going to be hopefully a multi-day kind of a thing that we're building up. And I've been wanting to do something more like this with the videos here for a little while. So I finally came up with something that I felt would be fun to actually build. So if you've done any Node, you've probably dealt with the Express library, and so this first little bit of code here is basically just kind of configuring it. And Express, I really enjoyed using it, but there's a problem with it. I think is that you end up writing a lot of code like this. So app get, you pass your path, and then you pass a function. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, really, there's not a lot wrong with it. That's way better than what a lot of other frameworks have done with it. But app.get, so we're calling a function here. We know because we've got parens and stuff. We're passing a path, and then we're passing a callback function to it. The problem, though, is that we have to be setting and modifying some sort of internal state within this app, because this app get, this function, it doesn't return anything. And if a function doesn't return anything, then the only reason to call it is to perform some sort of a side effect. So what I'm hoping to do with this is to basically remove all of that. So I want to create something that we declare that we can compose all of our functions together, have one function that is our app function that's composed of smaller functions, and that can run. So let's look at how we're going to do that. So the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to create our type that everything is going to use. And this is highly lifted from Suave. So coming from my F# background, Suave.io is where this concept of a web part came from. I think it's just a really, really cool idea. Ours is slightly different, but anyway, so we're gonna include Ramda, we're gonna include Ramda Fantasy, and our type is gonna be this web part, and it's going to take a request, and it's going to return either of a future. So it's going to be either of a 404, so we'll be able to match on routes, similar to what we're doing here with the with Express, and then everything's going to return this future, because if you think about it, that's kind of what Express is doing here. It's not doing a future, it's doing a callback. But that's, as we've seen, it's very, very easy to wrap callbacks into futures. And then request. What's request? Well, if you notice, all of the Express stuff basically has request, response, and then a next. That's no good for us as multiple arguments. What we would like to do is to just combine it all into one. And so you'll see what we'll actually do is at our loader here that we're about to see, we're going to basically take that multi-arg thing and create a tuple, or a triple, I guess, in this case. Alright, so our application loader, so this is going to look maybe a little bit scary, but to get actually to where we can actually put something out in a 5 or 6 minute video, I'm going to gloss over this for just a little bit, but basically we have a load app function which takes a web part, which is what we talked about here. It's going to call app use. We've got our function, so this is our kind of bootstrapping us into Express here. And we're going to call web part, which we know takes a request, which is one of these things. So here's where we're taking this multi-argument thing, putting them all into a triple. And then we know that's going to return an either, so we need to pattern match on the either. So if it's a left, that means we couldn't match on it, so we're going to return a 404. If we get something, then we know that inside of that is a future, so we actually want to execute whatever that future is. If there's an error executing that future, we'll return a 500. So that's like if it was an unhandled exception or something. And then if that was okay, then we'll just end whatever our response stream is. So what all this is going to look like. So our first writer, I'll go back into some of this other stuff in future videos, but I want to get through it to where we can actually write something out. So we're going to have a writer. And our writer, what we want it to be, if we were to look at its type, it would take a status code. I will say a string, but basically some sort of something that can be piped to the output. And then it returns our web part. So our web part takes this request thing and returns an either of a future of something. So what we could do is we could create an OK function, which will end up taking a string to a web part, and it's just basically going to partially apply this 200, or status code, to the writer. And the reason that I've done it this way is because we could do a const not found would be a writer 404. And so we could keep going like that. So that would be very, very simple to continue creating a whole bunch of different ones like that. So what is our app going to look like? So all of this code that's up here would be in whatever our other library is. It would wrap all of this stuff up. So what's our most simple thing? Our actual code that we're writing, if we're going to use this framework, looks like this. So const hello world is just going to be a hello world. So we know that hello world is a web part. So we can pass that into load app. We say load app, we can pass hello world, and this would return 200 OK for hello world for every possible thing that came in. So what's it going to look like? Well, let's look. If we go over here, you may have noticed at the beginning that I'm using this thing from RunKit here. This basically allows me to use Express but pipe through so that RunKit will automatically create my endpoint for me. So we can go over here, we can refresh this after the changes that we made, and we see that if we hit this endpoint, we get hello world. And if I wanted to say hello read, we could modify hello read there for the output. Run this again, and you see we get hello read. So this is actually working, very, very declarative. We're saying what this thing is. In this case, this is the most simple thing that we can do, but it also got us through what our application loader would look like, introduced you to our type. Keep in mind that our type is a function, and showing maybe some of the things that are difficult here to think about, and then just kind of configuring our Express. So there you have it. This is our first writer. We'll look into filtering and stuff on our next one, and we'll just kind of build up different things. So we've got our writer. We'll create filters. We'll create introspection. We'll do a bunch of different things there. But I hope you enjoyed this. As the very, very tip of the iceberg for us continuing on actually building up a pure web server. And I hope you enjoyed it.